Welcome to Moon Mind Temple. Tonight, we're going to explore something that's happening inside your head right now. That constant chatter of thoughts that never seems to take a day off. If you're enjoying this journey into Zen Buddhism for better sleep, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's exploration together. Congratulations, you've just become aware of your own mind. The good news, you're conscious. The bad news, your thoughts won't shut up. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, there's probably another voice running commentary in the background of your awareness. It might be planning tomorrow's tasks, replaying that awkward conversation from yesterday, or just randomly wondering if you remembered to lock the door. That mental narrator never applied for the job, never signed a contract, and certainly never asked your permission to move in. Yet there it is, chattering away like an uninvited house guest who's made themselves completely at home. Have you ever noticed how these thoughts just seem to appear out of nowhere? One moment you're focused on what I'm saying, the next your mind is wandering through a detailed fantasy about what you'll eat for breakfast tomorrow. It's as if someone inside is generating these thoughts. But who? In Zen Buddhist circles, we often hear the phrase, "You are not your thoughts." But if you're not your thoughts, then who exactly is thinking them? This question might sound simple, but its answer unravels everything we assume about identity and who we are. In this video, we'll explore how this very question, who is thinking these thoughts, might actually be pointing to an illusion, because the moment you try to find the thinker, something profound happens. Let's try something right now. Pause for a moment and attempt to predict your very next thought. Go ahead, really try. Just take a second to forecast what thought is going to pop into your head next. Did you succeed? If you pay close attention, you'll notice something potentially groundbreaking. Thoughts arise spontaneously. You, as a separate individual, don't decide to think them. They just appear, like uninvited guests showing up at your mental doorstep. This reveals something fundamental: the absence of a separate, isolated thinker. Thoughts appear simply as occurrences within awareness. They're spontaneous appearances, without a separate entity producing them. It's like waves in the ocean. They rise and fall without a separate doer behind them. The ocean isn't sitting there deciding, "I think I'll make a wave right here." In one way, you could say the ocean is indeed creating the waves, but ultimately there's no individual part of the ocean doing each wave. The waves are actually temporary patterns of energy influenced by the movement of the entire ocean, a complex network of causes and conditions. Your thoughts work similarly. They're not owned by an individual entity called you. They're just energetic patterns appearing in what you might call the larger mind, a mix of what you've learned, messages you've heard, and as hypnotists and illusionists have demonstrated, even what you might have absorbed subconsciously. So, if thoughts arise spontaneously without a separate doer, then why do they feel so personal? Why does it seem like I am thinking them? The answer is identification. The mind creates a sense of ownership over thoughts. It says, "These are my thoughts. I am the thinker. These are my opinions, my beliefs, and my ideas." And many people grip onto these so tightly that they create a rigid personal identity that dominates their entire life experience. But is this true? Or is it just another belief, an assumption, another thought arising within awareness? This is the ego illusion, the habit of identifying with mental activity, when in reality it's all just appearing in you. But it's not essential to you. It's you, the real you, the awareness, appearing as thought, but it's not your essential nature. If all thoughts were to disappear, you wouldn't go anywhere. Nothing would be taken away from you. You'd still be 100% you, this awareness, just without the presence of thoughts. Take a look for yourself. Look at the gap between two thoughts. Did you, the awareness, go anywhere? Or did you remain here, still 100% you? We experience that inner voice narrating, commenting, analyzing, and it feels like a self is behind it, directing, controlling, guiding. But if we investigate closely, we see that this inner voice is just thoughts appearing with no separate speaker behind it. It's like watching a movie and mistaking the characters for real people, like believing there's actually separate, independent entities behind the voices of the characters, when in reality they're appearances in the larger appearance of the movie. But who is watching the movie of thoughts? That's the real question. What if the I that we believe is doing the thinking is just another thought? This is the deep insight we're pointing to. Thoughts create the illusion of a stable self that exists over time. But when you look directly for this self, what do you find? Nothing. Just the presence of awareness appearing as everything that's appearing, including any thought. Thoughts appear and disappear without a trace, as they do. When thoughts are identified with, they appear as a long chain of apparent cause and effect. One thought triggers another. A memory sparks an emotion. An emotion fuels more thoughts. And before you know it, the mind is in a loop. This is mind identification, when awareness overlooks its larger nature and takes itself to be a limited idea, a limited thought narrative. The key is to see that thoughts are happening, but they're not happening to you. They're not you, a separate entity thinking them. They're conditioned energy patterns, movements within the larger field of consciousness, and you don't have to consent to believing them. You don't have to take them to be the essence of who you are. Because this is a huge dysfunction that appears in so many people's lives. Many of us have thoughts that are extremely self-limiting, dark or destructive, and we can take ourselves to be the one thinking those thoughts. Perhaps thoughts appear that are terrible judgments of others, and then we feel extremely guilty for even thinking them. Perhaps thoughts appear that talk about harming others or even ourselves, and we may feel extremely disturbed, trying desperately to push them away, or believing that we're the one thinking them, and perhaps actually carrying them out. So this question of who is the thinker is absolutely crucial for all of us. It's the difference between completely different outcomes in life. You are not the thoughts. You are the awareness in which they happen. When we realize the belief in our thoughts to be highly problematic, we often try to fight the thoughts. Then we might try to silence the mind, but that's like trying to calm the ocean by attempting to grab the waves, control them, or suppress them. Like a wave trying to control another wave when they're both simply movements of the entire ocean. So don't suppress the thoughts. Don't resist them. Don't personally identify with them, taking them to be the entirety of who you are and indulging in them. Rest as the awareness in which they appear. Witness them. The moment you see them as not you, as you stay knowingly aware as the awareness, they lose their power. And this isn't about denying how you think or feel, or saying thoughts are just useless illusions and trying to ignore all of them. All thoughts have some kind of information to them. They may hold a relative truth. They may often be useful and creative. They're just not the whole truth. The key is to recognize them as an aspect, conditioned energy patterns arising. All these aspects need their voice in a way. Trying to shut them up or ignore them means they just return with a vengeance, like trying to shut someone up by trapping them behind a door until they erupt into a fit of rage, smash through the door, and burst into the room screaming. Of course, there isn't really any separate entity there. It's just how they operate. Waves don't disappear and collapse into the larger medium of the ocean by trying to suppress them. They eventually lose their energy on their own and naturally collapse as you rest, watching the dancing movement of the ocean. So let's try something right now. For the next few seconds, just observe your thoughts like watching clouds drift by. Do you notice a shift? Maybe some spaciousness, maybe some stillness. That space is you. That stillness is what you are, not the passing thoughts. Again, they are an appearance of you. They are this awareness temporarily appearing as thought, but they are not essential to your being. They are energetic movements which dissolve on their own without personal interference. And this recognition is the beginning of freedom. There's an assumption that somewhere deep inside, there is a thinker controlling all of this. But if you go looking for it, what do you find? Advaita calls this self-inquiry, the practice of turning the attention inward and asking, who am I? And when this inquiry is done earnestly, the realization dawns. There is no separate self. So here we speak of aspects, conditioned energy patterns that arise in the field of awareness. Advaita refers to this as vasanas, subtle tendencies that create the illusion of selfhood. Thoughts arise as parts of these aspects, but they are not personal. They are movements of energy playing out. When seen clearly, their power dissolves. There's a story in Advaita about a man searching for his glasses, frustrated and panicking, until he realizes they were on his face the whole time. This is like looking for the true self. You may have been searching for it as if it was hidden, but it's the one looking. And ultimately, the observer is the observed. Just like waves in the ocean are not separate from the ocean, thoughts are not separate from awareness. Try to find the gap, the distance between awareness and all the objects, the sights, the sounds, the thoughts, and sensations. The objects appearing in awareness are made out of nothing other than the awareness itself. No distance, no separation between you and the world. There's just consciousness appearing as the human, you, in the world. This is the realization that ends the illusion of the separate thinker. We may have the thought, I'm not awake yet. I'm not seeing it. I'm not understanding this. I need something profound to happen, a new experience to wake up. Not realizing those are just more thoughts. So the belief in thinking seems strong, but it can collapse at any moment. All it takes is honesty, honest inquiry about what's actually going on. Are you thinking those thoughts, or did they just appear? Are they really your identity, really the truth, or just appearances within the larger, infinite you, this boundless field of awareness. There's a traditional Advaita inquiry. Can the eye see itself? The eye sees everything, but cannot see itself. In the same way, awareness is what sees everything, yet it cannot be seen as an object. It can't be reduced to a thing that you can objectify and grab hold of, for it's the basis of the whole appearance. So instead of trying to find awareness, rest as awareness. Perceptually relax and rest as the whole appearance, watching the aspects play out and disappear. These conditioned thoughts and emotions that seem to color and dictate our life. They begin to lose their influence without identification. For many years, you may have felt stuck in the grip of a persistent, uncomfortable emotion, a persistent limiting belief that seems impossible to shake. You may have tried hours of chanting affirmations, thinking positive thoughts, or focusing only on the good, and yet they always seem to rear their ugly head again and again. Yet when you rest as awareness, when you actually feel the feeling instead of contracting your focus onto the thinking, when you allow the aspects to arise and play out without identification, their energy eventually dissolves. The emotion is released and the limited thinking collapses with it. The classic non-duality metaphors appear so often because they're so powerful. Imagine the sky, vast, open, untouched, with the clouds passing through it. The sky doesn't resist the clouds. It doesn't claim ownership of them. Thoughts are like those clouds. The sky isn't separate from the clouds. The clouds are, in fact, the sky clouding, but they are not essential to the sky. Without any clouds, the sky remains vast, bright, and boundlessly open. You are that sky of awareness, limitless, ever-present, and no matter how stormy or chaotic the clouds become, you, the sky, remain forever undisturbed. This is the direct realization of your inherent freedom, not as a new belief or some kind of intellectual conclusion, but as the direct seeing of the nature of awareness, the nature of your true self. So freedom isn't about stopping thought. It's in no longer taking it to be who you are and pushing yourself into that limited identity. Because you don't have to fight to be free. You don't have to struggle to be present. That's just another identity that fights and struggles. More thinking and personal effort trying to achieve what's already achieved. The awareness that you are is effortless. Instead, recognize it, relax into it, and let the mind do what it does without claiming it as me. And so, if you're not your thoughts, who's thinking them? The true non-answer is a seeming paradox. If you insist on a who, you could say it's infinite awareness, not as a personal someone, but as a movement of the entire field of consciousness. The who is God, infinite being, expressing itself in an infinite myriad of forms. On the other side of the coin, you can see that there's actually no thinker at all. It's an illusion, an appearance. You see, self and no self are two sides of the same duality. The truth is non-dual, not one nor the other, yet it includes all. This is your true nature. Now, one challenge I hear from people is this: but if I don't identify with my thoughts, won't I become passive? Won't I lose my ability to function in the world? The beautiful paradox is that the opposite is true. When we stop identifying exclusively with our thoughts, we actually become more effective, more present, more responsive to what's actually happening, rather than lost in our interpretations and stories about what's happening. Consider how much mental energy is consumed by defending our positions, ruminating over past events, anxiously rehearsing future scenarios, or simply getting lost in the labyrinth of our own thinking. When we recognize thoughts as simply appearances in awareness rather than who we are, all that energy becomes available for direct engagement with life as it is. This doesn't mean we don't use thinking as a tool. Of course we do. Thinking is an incredibly useful function when applied appropriately. We use it to solve problems, to communicate, to create. But we no longer mistake the tool for the user. We no longer believe we are our thoughts. I want to give you a practical example of how this understanding transforms everyday experience. Imagine you're having a difficult conversation with someone. They say something that triggers a strong emotional reaction in you. Immediately, thoughts arise. How dare they say that? They always do this. They don't respect me. When identified with these thoughts, you become them. You are the anger, the hurt, the indignation. Your words and actions flow from this contracted state, often making the situation worse. But what if, in that heated moment, you recognize these thoughts as just appearances in awareness? You still feel the emotional energy, but you're not completely identified with the narrative about what it means. There's a spaciousness around the experience. From this spaciousness, you might respond rather than react. You might sense the fear or pain behind the other person's words. You might express your own feelings clearly without attacking. The conversation could take a completely different turn. This isn't about suppressing your authentic response or pretending you're not affected. It's about relating to your thoughts and emotions from awareness rather than being completely consumed by them. And this makes all the difference in how we navigate relationships, work challenges, and daily stresses. What's remarkable is that this shift in perspective is available in any moment. It doesn't require years of meditation practice, though practice can certainly help. It simply requires a willingness to look directly at your experience and question the assumption that you are your thoughts. Think about a recent time when you were caught in a loop of worry or rumination. Maybe you were mentally rehearsing all the ways a future event could go wrong, or replaying a past interaction and thinking of all the things you should have said. We've all been there. In those moments, we're completely identified with thought. We're not aware of awareness itself. We're lost in the content of mind, rather than recognizing the context in which all content appears. But even in the midst of the most intense thought storm, awareness is always present. It's what knows the thinking is happening. And recognizing this awareness, even for a moment, can create a profound shift. Many spiritual traditions use various practices to help us recognize this awareness. Meditation, self-inquiry, contemplation, these are all pointers to direct recognition of our true nature. But ultimately, no practice can produce what's already here. They can only help remove the obstacles to recognizing what's always been the case. In Zen, there's a beautiful metaphor about the moon reflected in water. When the water is turbulent, the moon's reflection appears broken and distorted. When the water becomes still, the reflection appears clear and whole. But the moon itself never changes. In the same way, awareness is always here, always clear, always whole, regardless of how turbulent or chaotic our thoughts may be. The practices aren't creating awareness. They're simply allowing the water of our mind to become still enough that we can recognize what's always been the case. This recognition doesn't have to be dramatic or special. In fact, it's utterly ordinary. It's simply the clear seeing of what's already here, the awareness that knows the sensations in your body, the sounds in your environment, the thoughts arising and passing in your mind. This awareness isn't personal. It doesn't belong to anyone. Yet paradoxically, it's more intimately you than any thought, memory, or self-concept could ever be. It's what you are at the most fundamental level, beneath all the layers of identification and belief. And here's the truly liberating part. This awareness is completely free of all the limitations, fears, and sufferings that seem to define the separate self. It's untouched by the content that appears within it, just as the sky is untouched by the clouds that pass through it. Now, you might be wondering, if I'm not my thoughts, if I'm this boundless awareness, why don't I experience myself that way? Why do I feel so limited, so separate, so identified with this particular body and mind? The answer lies in what various traditions call conditioning or programming. From earliest childhood, we're taught to identify exclusively with our body, our name, our story, our thoughts, our emotions. This conditioning runs deep. It's reinforced by language, culture, education, and nearly every interaction we have. We learn to say my thoughts the same way we say my hand or my car, as if thoughts are possessions that belong to a separate self. We learn to believe that we are thinking our thoughts, rather than recognizing that thoughts simply arise within awareness. This conditioning creates a kind of hypnotic trance, a deep-seated belief in separation that colors all of our experience. We come to experience ourselves as a separate someone inside a body, looking out at a world that's fundamentally other than ourselves. But this sense of separation is itself just another appearance in awareness, a thought, a feeling, a deeply ingrained pattern of perception. It's not the truth of who we are. When we begin to question this conditioning, to look directly at our experience without the filter of our beliefs about it, cracks begin to appear in the facade of separation. We start to notice the boundless awareness that's always been here, the awareness that has no edges, no center, no inside or outside. One of the most powerful ways to recognize this boundless awareness is to notice what never changes throughout all your experience. Thoughts come and go. Emotions arise and pass. Sensations appear and disappear. Perceptions shift and transform. But the awareness in which all of this appears, that never changes. It's the same awareness now that was present when you were a child, a teenager, a young adult. It's the same awareness in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, in clarity and in confusion. It never comes and goes. It's what's always here, the constant background of all experience. And yet, paradoxically, this awareness isn't a thing, an object or an entity. It has no form, no boundaries, no location. It can't be grasped or defined. It's more like the space in which all things appear, not empty nothingness, but a pregnant fullness that contains all possibilities. When we recognize this awareness as what we are, something profound happens. The sense of being a separate self, of being confined to a particular body and mind, begins to soften. We still function through this body and mind, but we no longer feel limited to them. Instead, we begin to sense the boundless, interconnected nature of all things. We recognize that the same awareness that's looking out through our eyes is also the awareness in which the entire world appears. There's no inside or outside to awareness, it's all one seamless whole. This recognition transforms how we relate to every aspect of our experience. Thoughts no longer appear as my thoughts, but simply as movements within the field of awareness. Emotions no longer define who we are, but are seen as temporary energetic expressions arising and passing. Even the body is experienced not as a separate object, but as a constellation of sensations appearing in awareness. This doesn't mean we become detached or disconnected from life. Quite the opposite. When we're no longer caught in the trance of separation, we can engage with life more fully, more intimately, more compassionately. We're no longer defending a separate self against a threatening world. We're participating in the dance of life as awareness expressing itself in infinite forms. From this place, love arises naturally, not as a feeling towards something other than ourselves, but as the recognition of our shared nature, our fundamental non-separation. Compassion flows without effort because there's no other to whom we need to extend compassion. It's all us, all awareness, all one interconnected whole. This understanding has profound implications for how we live our lives. When we no longer identify exclusively with our thoughts, our choices come from a deeper place, from awareness itself, rather than the conditioned patterns of thinking. We become less reactive, more responsive. We act from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear. And paradoxically, we become more uniquely ourselves, more authentically expressed, when we recognize that we're not limited to the separate self. The separate self is always comparing, always conforming or rebelling, always seeking approval or asserting its difference. But when we recognize ourselves as awareness, we're free to express the unique flavor of awareness that flows through this particular body-mind without the distortions of ego identification. Think of it like this. Each wave in the ocean is unique in its expression, its height, its shape, its movement. But no wave is separate from the ocean itself. In the same way, each of us is a unique expression of awareness, but not separate from the awareness that we all share. This understanding doesn't come through more thinking or analysis. It comes through direct seeing, through looking at our own experience with honest attention. When we look for the thinker of our thoughts, what do we actually find? Not a separate entity inside our head, but simply more thoughts, more sensations, more images, all appearing in the space of awareness. And what's left when we see through the illusion of the separate thinker? Just this, the simple, undeniable fact of being aware. Not as a concept or a belief, but as the immediate reality of our experience. This awareness is not personal. It doesn't belong to anyone, yet it's more intimate than anything we call mine. So how do we live from this recognition? Not by trying to maintain a special state or by suppressing thoughts and emotions. Rather, by simply being honest about what we find when we look directly at our experience. We notice that thoughts arise on their own. We notice that there's no separate thinker to be found. We notice the awareness that's always here, always present, regardless of what's appearing within it. From this noticing, our relationship to thoughts naturally shifts. We no longer feel compelled to believe every thought, to defend our opinions as if they were our identity, or to be controlled by the endless stream of mental commentary. Instead, we recognize thoughts as movements within our larger nature, like waves on the ocean or clouds in the sky. This shift isn't just philosophical. It has profound practical implications for how we live. When we no longer identify exclusively with our thoughts, we become less reactive, less defensive, more present to what's actually happening, rather than lost in our interpretations and stories about what's happening. Let's explore this further through a practical example. Imagine you're facing a challenging problem, perhaps a difficult decision or a complex task. From a conventional perspective, you might think, I need to figure this out. I need to think harder. You might strain and struggle, spinning in circles of thought. But from the perspective of Zen, the approach is quite different. You still engage with the problem, but you do so from a place of spacious awareness rather than contracted thinking. You allow thoughts to arise naturally without forcing them or identifying with them. You create space for insight to emerge. This doesn't mean you become passive or disengaged. On the contrary, you become more effectively engaged because you're no longer limited by your habitual thought patterns. You can access a deeper intelligence that includes but transcends conceptual thinking. Buddhism points to this difference between doing and being done. When we're identified with thoughts, we believe we're the doer, the one making decisions, solving problems, directing our life. But when we look closely, we see that even the sense of being the doer is itself just another appearance in awareness. Actions happen, decisions are made, problems are solved, but not by a separate self. Rather, they unfold as movements of the entire field of awareness, influenced by countless conditions and causes. Our sense of being the doer is added after the fact, a mental story that claims ownership of what's already happening. This doesn't mean we're helpless puppets or that our choices don't matter. It means that the true source of our choices and actions is much deeper than the separate self we typically identify with. It's the vast intelligence of awareness itself, which includes but transcends the limited perspective of the individual. When we recognize this, our relationship to thought shifts naturally. We no longer feel that we are thinking thoughts. Rather, we notice that thoughts are appearing in awareness, sometimes useful, sometimes not, but never defining who we are. In practical terms, this understanding transforms how we relate to challenging emotions and experiences. When difficult feelings arise, anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, we no longer identify with them as my anger or my anxiety. We recognize them as temporary energetic patterns arising in awareness. We don't need to suppress these feelings or act them out. We can simply allow them to be as they are, to move through us without resistance. In this allowing, these emotions often transform naturally, revealing their deeper message or simply dissolving on their own. The same applies to physical pain and discomfort. While we may still seek appropriate treatment, We no longer add the suffering of resistance and identification to the physical sensation. We can experience pain directly, without the additional mental anguish of "why me?" or "I can't bear this." Even our sense of self becomes more fluid and less fixed. Rather than maintaining a rigid identity based on particular thoughts, memories, and beliefs, we discover an identity that's open, responsive, and not limited to any particular content of mind. We are the awareness in which all identities appear, not any specific identity itself. This doesn't mean we lose our individuality or our ability to function in the world. On the contrary, we function more effectively because we're no longer confined by a narrow self-concept. We can respond to each situation freshly without the burden of maintaining a consistent self-image. In relationships, this understanding can be transformative. When we no longer identify completely with our thoughts and opinions, we can listen more openly to others. We don't need to defend our position or prove ourselves right. We can engage in genuine dialogue rather than battling to protect our ego. We also recognize that others, like ourselves, are not limited to their thoughts or defined by their behavior. We can see beyond their conditioned patterns to the awareness that we all share. This doesn't mean we tolerate harmful behavior, but we respond to it from a place of clarity and compassion, rather than judgment and reactivity. In Buddhism, this is called seeing the Buddha nature in all beings, recognizing that beneath the surface appearances, we all share the same fundamental nature, the same boundless awareness. This recognition naturally gives rise to compassion and connection. It's important to clarify that this understanding doesn't lead to passivity or indifference. It doesn't mean we no longer care about what happens in the world or in our lives. On the contrary, when we're not caught in the narrow perspective of the separate self, we can respond more effectively, more compassionately, more appropriately to whatever arises. We still make choices, take actions, and engage fully with life. But these choices and actions come from a deeper place, from awareness itself rather than the conditioned patterns of the separate self. This leads to a life that's more authentic, more aligned with our deepest values, more responsive to the actual needs of each situation. And paradoxically, when we no longer identify exclusively with our thoughts, our thinking actually becomes clearer and more effective. Without the distortion of personal identification, we can see things more objectively, consider multiple perspectives more easily, and find creative solutions that might not be visible from the narrow viewpoint of the separate self. Freedom isn't about controlling or stopping thoughts. It's about recognizing their nature and our relationship to them. When we see that thoughts are not who we are, that they're temporary appearances in the space of awareness, like clouds in the sky, we're no longer tyrannized by them. We can let them be as they are without being controlled by them. This freedom is not something we achieve or attain. It's what we already are, beneath the layers of identification and belief. All that's needed is a clear seeing of what's already the case, the recognition of our true nature as awareness itself. In the midst of all the complexity and challenge of human life, this simple recognition is always available. I am not my thoughts. I am the awareness in which thoughts appear. This awareness is boundless, clear, and inherently free. It's what I truly am beneath all the layers of conditioning and belief. From this recognition, a natural ease and spaciousness begin to infuse our life. We still experience the full range of human emotions and challenges, but we're no longer completely identified with them. We can let life be as it is without constant resistance and struggle. We can respond to what arises from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear. And perhaps most importantly, we can enjoy the extraordinary gift of being alive, of experiencing this miraculous unfolding of life in all its richness and complexity. Not as a separate self struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its own infinite nature through this particular human form. For Buddhist practitioners, the path of practicing this understanding is sometimes referred to as the middle way, a path between the extremes of indulgence and asceticism, between total identification with thoughts and trying to eliminate them completely. This middle way doesn't ask us to stop thinking or to achieve some special state of consciousness. It simply invites us to see what's already here, the awareness that's present in every experience, the awareness that we already are. In Zen, there's a saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The outer activities of life may look the same, but our relationship to them has profoundly shifted. We no longer experience them as a separate self doing activities in a world outside itself, but as awareness expressing itself in infinite forms and activities. This shift in perspective doesn't require years of arduous practice, though practice can certainly help clear away the habitual patterns that obscure this recognition. It can happen in any moment when we're willing to look directly at our experience without the usual overlay of interpretation and judgment. And it's not an all or nothing realization. We may have glimpses of our true nature, moments of clarity when we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than being lost in thought. These glimpses gradually deepen and extend as we become more familiar with resting as awareness rather than identifying with the content of mind. But even a single clear glimpse can be transformative, shifting our entire relationship to our experience. Once we've recognized, even briefly, that we are not limited to our thoughts, that we are the awareness in which thoughts appear, we can never completely forget it. It remains as a seed of truth that continues to grow and flourish, even amidst the challenges and distractions of daily life. What's truly remarkable is that this recognition is always available in every moment. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It only asks us to look directly at what's already here. The awareness that feels the sensations in your body, that hears the sounds in your environment. This awareness isn't distant or abstract. It's not something to achieve or attain. It's the most immediate and intimate reality of your experience, more present than any thought, any emotion, any sensation. It's what you are, beneath all the layers of identification and belief. And recognizing this awareness as what you are brings a profound shift in perspective. The sense of being a separate self, confined to a particular body and mind, begins to soften. You still function through this body and mind, but you no longer feel limited to them. Instead, you begin to sense the boundless, interconnected nature of all things. You recognize that the same awareness that's looking out through your eyes is also the awareness in which the entire world appears. There's no inside or outside to awareness. It's all one seamless whole. This recognition transforms how you relate to every aspect of your experience. Thoughts no longer appear as my thoughts, but simply as movements within the field of awareness. Emotions no longer define who you are, but are seen as temporary, energetic expressions arising and passing. Even the body is experienced not as a separate object, but as a constellation of sensations appearing in awareness. In Zen Buddhism, this direct seeing is often described as returning to our original nature, to the mind before thinking, the face before we were born. It's not about achieving something new or special, but about recognizing what's always been the case. And this recognition doesn't come through more thinking or analysis. It comes through direct seeing, through looking at our own experience with honest attention. When we look for the thinker of our thoughts, what do we actually find? Not a separate entity inside our head, but simply more thoughts, more sensations, more images, all appearing in the space of awareness. And what's left when we see through the illusion of the separate thinker? Just this, the simple, undeniable fact of being aware, not as a concept or a belief, but as the immediate reality of our experience. This awareness is not personal. It doesn't belong to anyone, yet it's more intimate than anything we call mine. It's the peace we've been looking for all along, the peace that comes not from achieving or attaining anything, but from recognizing what's already here, the awareness that we are, the awareness that contains and transcends all the apparent complexity and challenge of human life. This peace is always available in every moment. It's the backdrop of all experience, the context in which all content appears. And recognizing it as what we are brings a profound shift in our relationship to life, from struggle to ease, from resistance to acceptance, from fear to love. So we've been exploring this profound Zen insight that you're not your thoughts, that they simply appear in awareness without a separate thinker producing them. But what does this understanding look like in real life? How does it transform your actual day-to-day experience? Imagine this. You're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. The digital clock on your dashboard seems to be mocking you as the minutes tick by. You're already running late for that crucial meeting. Your stomach tightens, your jaw clenches, and your mind, it erupts like a volcano of panicked thoughts. This is a complete disaster. I'm going to look so unprofessional. My boss is going to be furious. Why does this always happen to me? If that idiot hadn't cut me off earlier, I'd be there by now. In this moment, what's happening? You're not just having thoughts about traffic. You've become the traffic jam. Your entire being has contracted around this situation. Your body is rigid, your breathing shallow, your knuckles white on the steering wheel. There seems to be no space between you and this crisis. The only escape appears to be the traffic miraculously clearing, something completely outside your control. But what if, and this is where it gets fascinating, what if in that exact same moment you suddenly recognize these thoughts as just thoughts, not facts, not reality, not who you are, just temporary appearances in the vast sky of your awareness, like clouds drifting through. You'd still be sitting in traffic. You'd still be late. Those facts wouldn't change, but something profound would shift internally. Suddenly, there would be space around the experience. You might notice the deep blue of the sky above your car. You might feel the subtle rhythm of your breath. You might hear that song on the radio you'd been completely deaf to a moment before. You might even find yourself smiling at the absurdity of it all. This is the practical freedom that Zen points to. Not freedom from circumstances, but freedom within circumstances. Not the absence of thoughts, but a radically different relationship to them. The traffic doesn't need to clear for your mind to clear. The meeting doesn't need to be rescheduled for you to find peace, because that peace was never dependent on external conditions. It's woven into the very fabric of your being, the awareness you already are. Here's what's truly remarkable about this shift. When you're not completely fused with your thoughts about a situation, you often respond to it more effectively. From this more spacious perspective, you might calmly text your colleague about your delay. You might use this unexpected pause to mentally prepare for the meeting. You might even allow yourself a few moments of rest in the midst of your busy day. All because you're no longer drowning in thoughts. You're the awareness witnessing them. This shift in perspective doesn't require you to spend years meditating in a cave, though practice certainly helps. It's available in any moment when you're willing to question your automatic identification with the voice in your head. And it applies to literally every aspect of life, from traffic jams to relationship conflicts, from work deadlines to those existential crises we all face. Think about how we usually approach problems. When something challenging appears in our lives, our default response is to think harder, analyze more intensely, mentally rehearse every possible scenario and outcome. And yes, thinking absolutely has its place. It's a magnificent tool for certain kinds of problems. That spreadsheet isn't going to balance itself. But what if the most challenging problems you face aren't actually solved by more thinking? What if they're solved by stepping back from thought entirely and accessing a different kind of intelligence? The intelligence of awareness itself. This is what Zen masters are pointing to when they talk about not knowing or beginner's mind. It's not about becoming stupid or ignorant. It's about a profound receptivity, an openness that isn't constrained by all your preconceptions and habitual thought patterns. It's the mind that sees what's actually here, not what it thinks should be here. From this more spacious perspective, insights can arise that would never be available through effort-based thinking. Solutions emerge spontaneously. Creativity flows unhindered by fear or self-consciousness. This isn't mystical or supernatural. It's simply what happens when you're not completely identified with and limited by the running commentary in your head. Now let's talk about emotions. Those powerful energetic movements that can completely overtake us. Like thoughts, emotions arise spontaneously based on countless causes and conditions. They appear as sensations in the body, often accompanied by corresponding thought patterns. When we're fully identified with them, they seem to define who we are. I am angry. I am sad. I am anxious. But what if emotions, like thoughts, are simply appearances in awareness rather than defining who you are? What if you're not angry? You're the awareness in which anger appears. You're not anxious. You're the awareness in which anxiety appears. This subtle shift makes all the difference in the world. Instead of being swept away by emotional hurricanes or desperately trying to suppress them, you can allow emotions to move through you without resistance. You can feel them fully, the physical sensations, the corresponding thoughts, without being defined or controlled by them. This doesn't make you cold or detached like some emotionless robot. On the contrary, you can actually feel emotions more fully when you're not completely identified with them, when you're not adding layers of judgment, resistance, or elaborate stories. You can experience anger without acting from anger, sadness without drowning in sadness, anxiety without being paralyzed by anxiety. And like thoughts, emotions tend to move and transform naturally when they're not resisted or clung to. They deliver their message, express their energy, and then naturally dissolve, like waves that rise, crest, and return to the ocean. No wave ever got stuck in the middle of the ocean, refusing to change form. Yet humans get stuck in emotional states for days, months, sometimes even years, because we've identified with them as who we are. Consider what happens when you receive harsh criticism. Immediately, a wave of shame and anger floods your system. Your face feels hot. Your chest tightens. Thoughts race. How dare they say that about me? They have no idea how hard I've been working. Everyone must think I'm incompetent now. When you're identified with these reactions, you become them. You are the shame, the anger, the defensive thoughts. From this contracted state, you might lash out, withdraw, or obsess over the interaction for days. The criticism becomes a personal attack on your very being. But what if, in that heated moment, you recognized these thoughts and emotions as just appearances in awareness? You'd still feel the energetic charge, but you wouldn't be completely consumed by it. There would be space around the experience. You might notice the physical sensations without the added storyline. You might recognize that the criticism is about your work, not your worth as a human being. From this more spacious perspective, you might respond rather than react. You might consider whether there's anything useful in the feedback, or you might set a clear boundary if the criticism was truly unfair. Either way, your response would come from clarity rather than reactivity, from awareness rather than identification. This understanding also transforms our relationship to physical pain and discomfort. While we may still seek appropriate treatment, no Zen master would tell you to ignore a broken leg. We no longer add the suffering of resistance and identification to the physical sensation. We can experience pain directly, without the additional mental anguish of, "Why me?" or "I can't bear this," or "This should not be happening." Without these mental overlays, pain is just sensation, intense perhaps, but not inherently unbearable. The true suffering comes from the mental resistance to what is, the thoughts about the pain rather than the pain itself. There's a profound teaching from Zen Buddhism that highlights this distinction. A monk asked his master, "How do I escape from heat and cold?" The master replied, "Why not go where there is no heat or cold?" The monk asked, "Where is there no heat or cold?" The master answered, "When it's cold, the cold kills you. When it's hot, the heat kills you." This cryptic response points to something profound. When we fully experience cold without the added mental resistance, when we're killed by the cold, the suffering dissolves. The physical sensation remains, but the mental anguish disappears. We become one with the experience, rather than fighting against it from the position of a separate self. This is why Zen masters throughout history have been able to endure incredible physical hardships with remarkable equanimity. It's not because they don't feel pain, they absolutely do. It's because they don't add the additional layer of mental suffering to the physical sensation. They experience the pain directly, without resistance, without identification, without the narrative of a separate self that shouldn't be experiencing this. But perhaps the most profound transformation comes in our relationships with other people. When we recognize that we're not defined by our thoughts, that we're the awareness in which thoughts appear, we naturally extend this understanding to others as well. We recognize that they too are not limited to their thoughts, opinions, or behaviors. They too are awareness, temporarily identifying with particular patterns of thinking and feeling. This recognition doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior or pretend that actions don't have consequences. But it does mean we can respond from a place of clarity and compassion rather than judgment and reactivity. We can address the behavior without condemning the person. We can set boundaries without creating enemies. And we can listen, truly listen, to perspectives different from our own. When we're not completely identified with our thoughts and opinions, we're not threatened by differing viewpoints. We don't have to defend our position or prove ourselves right. We can engage in genuine dialogue, learning and growing together. Think about a disagreement with someone close to you. When you're deep in it, it probably feels like there's you with the right perspective and them with the wrong one. Their viewpoint may seem not just different, but threatening to your very identity. That's because when we're identified with our thoughts, any challenge to those thoughts feels like a challenge to who we are. But what if neither of you is your thoughts? What if you're both the awareness in which different thoughts and perspectives are appearing? Suddenly, disagreement doesn't have to mean division. You can honor the unique way awareness is expressing itself through each of you, even when those expressions seem to conflict. This understanding transforms how we relate to those closest to us, our partners, family members, and friends. We recognize that beneath the surface differences and occasional conflicts, we share the same fundamental nature. We're all awareness, temporarily expressing itself through different forms, personalities, and perspectives. From this recognition, love and compassion arise naturally, not as emotions we have to generate or maintain, but as the natural expression of our shared nature. We don't have to try to love others. When we recognize what we truly are, love is what we are. This doesn't mean relationships become perfect or conflict-free, but conflicts are no longer threatening to our sense of self. They're seen as temporary misunderstandings or differences in perspective rather than fundamental opposition. We can navigate them with more grace, more humor, more flexibility. Zen Buddhism offers a powerful story that illustrates this understanding. Two monks were walking along a path when they came to a river. A young woman was standing there, unable to cross because the water was too deep. Without hesitation, the older monk picked her up, carried her across the river, and set her down on the other side. The monks continued their journey in silence. Hours later, the younger monk could no longer contain himself. "As monks," he said, "we're not supposed to touch women. Why did you carry that woman across the river?" The older monk replied, "I put her down on the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story beautifully illustrates how our thoughts create suffering long after an event has passed. The younger monk was still carrying the woman in his mind, tormenting himself with thoughts about rules and propriety. The older monk, in contrast, responded directly to the needs of the situation and then let it go completely. This is the freedom that comes from recognizing we are not our thoughts, the freedom to respond appropriately to each situation without being bound by rigid rules or mental constructs. The older monk wasn't ignoring the monastic precepts. He was expressing their true spirit, compassion and service, rather than being caught in their letter. And this freedom is available to all of us in every moment. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It only requires recognizing what we already are, the awareness in which all experience appears, and allowing that recognition to inform our engagement with life. When we're caught in identification with thoughts, we're constantly filtering our experience through concepts, judgments, and beliefs. We're not seeing reality as it is, but as we think it is, or should be. We're arguing with reality, resisting what is, creating suffering for ourselves and others. But when we recognize ourselves as awareness, we can see more clearly, respond more appropriately, engage more fully with life as it is, rather than as we think it should be. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. It means we act from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear, from wholeness rather than fragmentation. This understanding also transforms our relationship with ourselves. The harsh self-judgment, the endless self-improvement projects, the sense of never being good enough. All of these stem from identifying with thoughts about who we should be, rather than recognizing what we already are. When we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than a collection of thoughts and self-concepts, the need for constant self-improvement naturally relaxes. We still grow and learn, but not from a sense of fundamental lack or inadequacy. We grow as awareness expressing itself more fully, more clearly, less obstructed by limiting beliefs and patterns. This doesn't mean we become complacent or stop setting goals and aspirations, but our goals come from a different place, from awareness itself rather than the conditioned patterns of the separate self. They're expressions of our deepest values and intuitions, rather than attempts to fix or complete ourselves. And paradoxically, when we no longer feel we need to change ourselves to be worthy or complete, authentic change happens more easily, without the added pressure and resistance that come from self-improvement projects. We naturally unfold and evolve in accordance with our deepest nature. This is the ultimate freedom that Zen points to. Not the freedom to get everything we want or to avoid all pain and difficulty, but the freedom to be fully ourselves, to express our true nature without the limitations of identification with thought. It's the freedom to live from awareness itself, rather than from the narrow perspective of the thought-identified self. And this freedom is not something distant or abstract. It's available right now, in this very moment. It's as close as your own awareness, the awareness that's hearing these words, that feels the sensations in your body, that notices the sounds in your environment. There's a famous Zen story that illustrates this immediate availability of freedom. A student asked Master Ichu, "What is the meaning of Zen?" The master picked up his teacup, took a sip, and then set it down. That was his entire answer. What was he showing? That Zen isn't about special states or complex philosophies. It's about direct experience. The simple act of drinking tea, fully present, without the overlay of conceptual thinking. It's about recognizing the awareness that's already here, already free, in the most ordinary activities. In Zen Buddhism, this direct pointing to the nature of awareness is sometimes referred to as awakening or enlightenment. But these terms can create confusion, suggesting a special state or experience that's different from ordinary awareness. The truth is both more ordinary and more extraordinary than that. Awakening isn't about achieving a special state of consciousness. It's about recognizing what's already here, the awareness that you already are. It's like a fish finally noticing the water it's been swimming in its entire life. The water was always there, always present, but unrecognized because it was so pervasive, so fundamental to the fish's experience. In the same way, awareness is so fundamental to our experience that we typically overlook it, focusing instead on the content that appears within awareness: thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions. But with a simple shift of attention, we can recognize awareness itself, the context in which all content appears. And this recognition isn't a one-time event after which everything is magically transformed. It's more like a continuous process of remembering and forgetting, recognizing and overlooking. We may have glimpses of our true nature, moments of clarity when we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than being lost in thought. And then we forget again, becoming reabsorbed in the content of experience. But each recognition makes the next one more likely, more accessible. We begin to develop a kind of muscle memory for recognizing awareness. And over time, these recognitions may deepen and extend, becoming more stable and pervasive. This doesn't mean we never get caught in thought identification again. Even the most awakened beings still have thoughts, still experience the full range of human emotions, still encounter the same challenges and difficulties as everyone else. The difference is in their relationship to these experiences, recognizing them as appearances within awareness rather than defining who they are. There's a famous Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The outer activities remain the same, but our relationship to them transforms completely. Before recognition of our true nature, we experience ourselves as separate doers of actions, constantly striving to achieve something or become something. After recognition, we experience the same activities as spontaneous expressions of the whole, happening by themselves without a separate doer. Consider the simple act of walking. When you're identified with thoughts, walking is something that you do, a separate self moving a body through space. But when you're resting as awareness, walking just happens. The intention to walk arises, the body moves. Sensations of movement appear in awareness. all happening by themselves without a separate controller or doer. This doesn't mean you become a passive observer of life. It means you participate in life more fully, more directly, without the interference of a separate self that's constantly commenting, judging, and trying to control. Actions flow more naturally, more responsively, more in harmony with what each situation calls for. And this is why Zen puts such emphasis on practice, not as a means to achieve enlightenment in the future, but as a continuous remembering of what we already are. Whether through meditation, self-inquiry, or mindful engagement with daily activities, practice helps us cultivate the habit of recognizing awareness rather than being lost in thought. In meditation, we sit quietly, allowing thoughts to arise and pass without following them or resisting them. We notice when we've become absorbed in thinking, and then gently return to awareness of breath, body sensations, or simply resting as awareness itself. This simple but profound practice helps us become familiar with the difference between being lost in thought and recognizing ourselves as the awareness in which thoughts appear. There's a Zen story that beautifully illustrates the essence of meditation. A student asked Master Ikkyu to write down some maxims of the highest wisdom. The master took his brush and wrote, "Attention." The student said, "Is that all?" The master wrote, "Attention, attention." The student became irritable and said, "That doesn't seem very profound or subtle to me." In response, the master wrote, "Attention, attention, attention." The student demanded, "What does attention mean anyway?" The master replied, "Attention means attention." What Ikkyu was pointing to is the heart of meditation practice, not some complex technique or esoteric state, but simply attention, awareness itself. When we're fully attentive, fully present, we recognize what we truly are, not a separate self defined by thoughts, but the boundless awareness in which all experience appears. In self-inquiry, we ask questions like, "Who am I?" or "What is aware right now?" Not to arrive at conceptual answers, but to point attention toward awareness itself, toward what we are beneath all the layers of thought and self-concept. And in daily life, we practice bringing this same recognition to our ordinary activities: eating, walking, working, relating to others. We notice when we've become identified with thoughts, when we're acting from the perspective of the separate self, and then gently shift back to awareness, to what we truly are. This ongoing practice doesn't lead to a state of perpetual bliss or the end of all challenges and difficulties. Life continues to unfold with all its complexity and intensity. But our relationship to life changes dramatically. We no longer experience ourselves as a separate self struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its own nature through this particular human form. And from this recognition, a natural ease and joy begin to infuse our life. Not the conditional happiness that depends on getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want, but the unconditional joy of being itself, of awareness expressing and experiencing its own infinite nature. One of the most beautiful aspects of this understanding is that it's not dependent on any particular belief system or religious framework. While we're exploring it through the lens of Zen Buddhism, this direct recognition of awareness as our true nature is available to anyone, regardless of their background or beliefs. You don't have to be a Buddhist or even spiritual to recognize that you are not your thoughts, that you're the awareness in which thoughts appear. This is a direct observation about the nature of experience, not a religious doctrine or philosophy to believe in. And this recognition doesn't require you to abandon your existing beliefs or adopt new ones. It simply invites you to look directly at your experience, to notice what's already here, but typically overlooked. The awareness that you are, the awareness that's hearing these words right now. This simplicity is why Zen often uses such direct, minimalist language. It doesn't want to give the mind more concepts to grasp onto, more beliefs to identify with. It wants to point directly to what's already here, to what you already are. In fact, Zen masters sometimes say that Zen has nothing to teach, nothing to give you. It can only point to what you already have, what you already are. Like a finger pointing to the moon, the teachings are not meant to be grasped and believed, but to direct your attention toward direct seeing. And this direct seeing is available in any moment when you're willing to look. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It doesn't require years of practice or study. It only requires a willingness to question your assumptions about who you are and to look directly at the nature of awareness itself. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful metaphor about a wave in the ocean that becomes frightened when it notices it's going to crash on the shore. It thinks, "This is the end of me." But then it realizes that it's not just a wave, it's water. And water doesn't die when the waveform disappears. It simply returns to the ocean, which is what it always was. In the same way, the separate self that we typically identify with is like a wave in the ocean of awareness. It's a temporary form, a pattern of energy that arises and passes. When we identify exclusively with this form, we experience fear, isolation and suffering, like the wave that thinks it's going to die. But when we recognize our true nature as awareness itself, like the wave recognizing its water, the fear and suffering naturally relax. We see that what we essentially are doesn't come and go, doesn't live and die. It's the eternal presence of awareness itself, the context in which all forms arise and pass. This recognition doesn't mean we become disengaged from the waveform of our human life. On the contrary, we can engage more fully, more authentically, more compassionately, because we're no longer driven by the fear and isolation of the separate self. We can enjoy the unique expression of awareness that this particular life represents, without the constant anxiety about protecting and preserving a self that was never really separate in the first place. And this is the paradox of non-duality, of recognizing ourselves as awareness. We don't lose our individuality. We discover what true individuality is. Not the isolated, defensive, separate self, but the unique expression of awareness that this particular life represents. Like a wave that knows it's the ocean, we can fully express our unique form while recognizing our essential nature as boundless awareness. This understanding also transforms our relationship to time. When we're identified with thoughts, we're constantly time traveling, remembering the past, planning for the future, rarely fully present to the moment that's actually here. Our lives become a series of destination points, always arriving somewhere else, never really arriving here. But when we recognize ourselves as awareness, we naturally rest in the present moment. not because we're trying to be present, but because awareness itself is always present. It doesn't exist in the past or future. It's always here, always now. This doesn't mean we can't think about the past or plan for the future. Of course we can, but we do so from the ground of present awareness rather than being lost in time. We remember the past without being confined by it. We plan for the future without sacrificing the only moment that's ever actually here, this one. And in this present moment awareness, life becomes incredibly vivid and immediate. Colors seem more vibrant, sounds more clear, sensations more alive. We're not experiencing them through the filter of our concepts and judgments, but directly as they are. This is what Zen means by ordinary mind. The mind that experiences things directly, without the constant overlay of thought and judgment. This directness also transforms how we relate to nature and the world around us. When we're not caught in the web of our thoughts and self-concerns, we can truly see the bird on the branch, the cloud in the sky, the flower by the path. We can appreciate the extraordinary beauty and mystery of existence, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. And we begin to sense the interconnectedness of all things, not as a concept or belief, but as a lived reality. We recognize that the boundaries we perceive between ourselves and the world, between this and that, are mental constructions rather than absolute realities. Beneath these apparent separations, everything is one seamless whole. Awareness expressing itself in infinite forms. This understanding also transforms our relationship to death and impermanence. When we're identified with the separate self, death appears as the ultimate threat, the final ending of everything we hold dear, and impermanence, the constant changing of all forms, becomes a source of anxiety and sorrow. But when we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than a separate self, death and impermanence appear in a different light. We see that what we essentially are, awareness itself, doesn't come and go, doesn't live and die. It's the eternal presence in which all forms arise and pass. The particular form that this life takes will certainly change and eventually end. But what we essentially are remains untouched by these changes. It's like the screen on which a movie plays. The images come and go, but the screen itself remains unchanged. This doesn't mean we become indifferent to the preciousness of this life or the sadness of loss. On the contrary, we can appreciate the extraordinary gift of being alive in this particular form, with all its joys and sorrows, precisely because we're not depending on it to define who we are or to last forever. We can embrace the impermanence of all forms as the very thing that makes life so precious and beautiful. Like a rainbow that appears briefly and then dissolves, the transient nature of experience makes it more exquisite, not less. And we can face death not as the ultimate tragedy, but as a natural transition, a changing of form. This doesn't mean there's no sadness or grief in loss. Of course there is. But beneath the sadness, there's a recognition that what we essentially are cannot be lost, because it was never separate, never confined to a particular form in the first place. Zen has a beautiful koan that points to this understanding. Show me your original face before your parents were born. This enigmatic question isn't asking about physical appearance or ancestry. It's pointing to what you are prior to birth and death, prior to all conditions and circumstances. The awareness that has no beginning or end, that's present now as the knowing of these words. This understanding also transforms how we relate to our deepest longings and aspirations. When we're identified with the separate self, we're constantly seeking fulfillment through external objects, experiences, and achievements. We think, when I get this job, this relationship, this recognition, then I'll be happy. But no matter how many of these external goals we achieve, the sense of lack and longing persists. Because what we're really seeking isn't outside us. It's what we already are, the boundless awareness that is our true nature. When we recognize this awareness as what we are, the search naturally relaxes. We still engage in activities, still set goals and aspirations, still enjoy achievements and experiences, but we no longer depend on them to complete us or to define who we are. They become expressions of our nature rather than attempts to fulfill or fix ourselves. And paradoxically, when we no longer need external circumstances to make us happy, we can enjoy them more fully, more genuinely. We no longer bring the burden of expectation to our experiences. We can appreciate them for what they are, rather than demanding that they fulfill us or complete us. This doesn't mean we become passive or disengaged. On the contrary, we can engage more authentically, more creatively, more wholeheartedly, because we're no longer driven by the fear and lack of the separate self. We act from the fullness of awareness, rather than the emptiness of ego. And our actions come from a different place, from awareness itself, rather than the conditioned patterns of the separate self. They arise naturally in response to what each situation calls for, not from rigid rules or self-centered desires. In Buddhism, this is sometimes described as spontaneous, appropriate response. Action that arises naturally from awareness itself, rather than from the calculated thinking of the separate self. It's like the hand that automatically reaches out to catch a falling object without having to think about it, or the mother who responds instinctively to her child's needs without having to deliberate. There's a famous Zen story about Master Nansen, who found monks from the eastern and western halls of his monastery arguing over a cat. Each claimed ownership of the cat. Nansen held up the cat and said, "If any of you can give a word of Zen, you will save the cat. If not, I will kill it." No one could speak, so Nansen cut the cat in two. Later, when his disciple Joshu returned, Nansen told him what had happened. Joshu removed his sandals, placed them on his head, and walked out. Nansen said, "If you had been here, the cat would have been saved." This shocking story isn't advocating violence, of course. It's pointing to the difference between conceptual thinking and direct, appropriate response. The monks were caught in concepts of ownership and attachment. Joshu, in contrast, responded directly, without thinking. An expression of awareness, unconstrained by conceptual thought. This kind of action doesn't come from trying to conform to external standards or rules. It comes from recognizing what we truly are and allowing that recognition to inform our engagement with life. It's not about trying to be a good person according to some external standard. It's about expressing our true nature, which naturally manifests as kindness, compassion, and appropriate response. And this expression doesn't require effort or struggle. On the contrary, it has a quality of ease and flow. There's a naturalness to it, like water flowing downhill, or fire rising upward. It's not something we have to force or maintain. It's what naturally happens when we recognize what we are and allow that recognition to inform our actions. This understanding also transforms how we relate to our path of growth and development. When we're identified with the separate self, spiritual practice can become another form of self-improvement, another attempt to fix or complete ourselves. We practice in order to become more peaceful, more enlightened, more spiritual, reinforcing the very sense of lack and separation that causes suffering in the first place. But from the perspective of non-duality, of recognizing ourselves as awareness, practice takes on a different meaning. It's not about becoming something we're not. It's about recognizing what we already are and allowing the obstructions to that recognition to naturally dissolve. It's like the sun that's always shining above the clouds. The sun doesn't need to become more sunny or more present. It's already fully here, fully radiant. Practice is about allowing the clouds to disperse so that the sun's natural radiance can shine through unobstructed. And this brings us to one of the most beautiful paradoxes of spiritual awakening, the recognition that there's nowhere to go and nothing to attain, because what we're seeking is what we already are. From the perspective of the separate self, this can sound like a cop-out or a denial of the need for practice and growth. But from the perspective of direct seeing, of recognizing awareness as our true nature, it's the most profound truth that what we've been seeking through all our striving and struggling has been here all along, hidden in plain sight. This doesn't mean we stop practicing or growing. On the contrary, practice continues, perhaps with even more dedication and joy. But the motivation changes. We're no longer practicing to become something we're not. We're practicing to express more fully, more clearly, what we already are. And this shift in motivation transforms the entire tone and feeling of practice. There's a lightness to it, a joy, a sense of homecoming rather than striving to reach a distant goal. We're not trying to get somewhere else. We're discovering the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the everyday, the boundless in the apparent boundaries of our human life. This is the heart of Zen practice, not seeking something special or extraordinary, but recognizing the extraordinariness of what's already here, of ordinary mind, of everyday activities infused with awareness and presence. And this recognition is available in every moment, when we're washing dishes, walking down the street, having a conversation, dealing with challenges, celebrating joys. It's not confined to special times or sacred spaces. It's the very nature of our experience, the awareness in which all experience appears. There's a famous Zen story about a monk who asked his master, "What is the Buddha?" The master replied, "The dried dung stick." This shocking, irreverent response was pointing to something profound, that the sacred, the divine, the Buddha nature isn't something separate from ordinary reality. It's right here, in the most mundane, even seemingly unpleasant aspects of experience. So if you're not your thoughts, who's thinking them? The direct, non-conceptual answer is that there is no separate thinker. There's just thought arising in awareness, like waves in the ocean, like clouds in the sky. The belief in a separate thinker is itself just another thought, another appearance in awareness. When we recognize this, a natural freedom arises. the freedom to experience thoughts without being tyrannized by them. We can let thinking happen without believing and reacting to every thought that appears. We can rest as the awareness in which thoughts arise and pass, neither suppressing them nor being controlled by them. And from this recognition, our entire relationship to life transforms. We no longer experience ourselves as a separate self struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its infinite nature through this particular human form. We still experience the full range of human thoughts, emotions, and challenges, but we experience them differently, as appearances within awareness rather than defining who we are. And this difference makes all the difference. It's the difference between suffering and peace, between struggle and ease, between isolation and connection, not because our circumstances necessarily change, but because our relationship to our circumstances fundamentally shifts. And this shift is available right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It only requires a willingness to look directly at the nature of awareness itself, to recognize what you already are beneath all the layers of thought and self-concept. So let's take a moment to simply rest as awareness, to notice what's already here, but typically overlooked in our absorption with the content of experience. Notice the awareness that's hearing these words, that feels the sensations in your body, that notices the sounds in your environment. Notice that this awareness isn't located anywhere specific. It has no boundaries, no edges, no center or periphery. It's just this open, boundless presence in which all experience appears. And notice that this awareness doesn't require effort or struggle. It's effortlessly present, effortlessly aware. You don't have to try to be aware. You are awareness. It's what you already are, beneath all the layers of identification and belief. This recognition is the heart of Zen Buddhism, not as a philosophy to believe in or a teaching to understand, but as a direct seeing of what's already the case. It's as simple and as profound as recognizing the awareness that you are, the awareness in which all experience appears. From this recognition, a natural ease and joy begin to infuse our life. Not the conditional happiness that depends on getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want, but the unconditional joy of being itself, of awareness expressing and experiencing its own infinite nature through this particular human form. There's a profound Zen teaching story that illustrates the immediacy and simplicity of this recognition. A monk asked Master Hogan, "I have heard that in the sutras it says that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. Is this true?" Hogan replied, "It is not true." The monk was shocked. "But I've read this in many sutras. Why do you say it's not true?" Hogan explained, "Because Buddha nature isn't something beings have. Buddha nature is what beings are. It's not a possession or an attribute. It's not something that can be gained or lost. It's what you already are." This story points to the direct, non-dual nature of our true self. Buddha nature, awareness, consciousness, presence, isn't something we have. It's what we are. It's not separate from us, not something to attain or achieve. It's our very essence, the ground of our being, available in every moment if we simply recognize it. And this joy is available right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require special circumstances or achievements. It only requires recognizing what you already are. The awareness that's been here all along, hidden in plain sight. So as you drift into sleep tonight, allow this recognition to be your companion. Rest as awareness rather than struggling with thoughts. Allow thinking to happen without getting caught in its stories and dramas. And notice the peace that arises naturally when you recognize what you are. Not a separate self defined by your thoughts, but the boundless awareness in which all experience appears. In this recognition, there's a profound rest, deeper than sleep, more refreshing than any relaxation technique. It's the rest of coming home to what you already are, to the awareness that's been here all along, to the peace that's your true nature. Zen Buddhism offers a beautiful koan, or teaching riddle, that points to this restful nature of awareness. What is your original face before your parents were born? This isn't asking about physical appearance or ancestry. It's pointing to what you are prior to birth and death, prior to all conditions and circumstances. The awareness that was here before the body, before the personal self, before all concepts and identities. This original face, this primordial awareness, doesn't come and go with states of consciousness. It's present in waking, in dreaming, and in deep sleep. Only in deep sleep thought subsides completely, and what remains is pure awareness, unseparated from its content, experiencing itself as undifferentiated peace and fullness. And from this rest, both sleep and waking life are transformed. Sleep becomes more peaceful, more rejuvenating, and waking life becomes more vibrant, more authentic, more aligned with what you truly are. Not because you've achieved anything special, but because you've recognized what's already here. The awareness that you are, the awareness in which all experience appears. As you journey through the night, remember that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear, and this awareness remains present even in sleep, even in dreams. It's the constant, unchanging presence in which all states of consciousness come and go. So rest in this awareness, this beingness, that's your true nature. Allow the body to sleep, allow the mind to quiet, but remain as the awareness that you are, peaceful, present, undisturbed by the changing states of consciousness. There's a Zen story about a student who asked his master, "What is the essence of deep sleep?" The master replied, "In deep sleep, the 10,000 things return to their source. The witness and the witnessed become one." The student asked, "And where do they go?" The master simply closed his eyes and sat in silence. This wordless response points to something beyond concepts, that in deep sleep, the subject-object division dissolves. The awareness that you are remains, but without distinction between observer and observed. It's a taste of your true nature, of non-dual being, experienced every night but typically overlooked because there's no conscious recognition of it. But tonight, as you drift into sleep, you can do so with a different quality of attention. Not trying to stay awake or maintain consciousness, but simply recognizing the awareness that remains present through all states. And with this recognition, sleep can become not just a period of rest for the body and mind, but a return to your source, to the boundless awareness that you are. And when you wake in the morning, bring this same recognition with you into your day. Notice the awareness that's present in every experience, the awareness that doesn't come and go with thoughts or emotions or activities. It's always here, always now, always what you are beneath all the layers of identification and belief. This is the profound gift of Zen Buddhism, not a new belief or concept, but a direct pointing to what you already are, to the awareness that's been here all along, to the peace that's your true nature. It's as simple and as profound as recognizing the awareness that you are, the awareness in which all experience appears. There's a famous Zen story that speaks to this simplicity. A monk asked Master Joshu, "What is the meaning of Zen?" Joshu replied, "The cypress tree in the courtyard." The monk, confused, asked, "Aren't you talking about objective reality?" Joshu said, "No, I'm not talking about objective reality." "Then what is the meaning of Zen?" The monk persisted. Joshu again replied, "The cypress tree in the courtyard." What Joshu was pointing to is that Zen isn't about philosophical concepts or special states. It's about direct experience, the cypress tree as it is, not as we think about it. It's about recognizing the awareness in which the cypress tree appears, the awareness that you are. And from this recognition, your entire life is transformed. Not because your circumstances necessarily change, but because your relationship to your circumstances fundamentally shifts. You no longer experience yourself as a separate self, struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its infinite nature through this particular human form. This shift is the heart of spiritual awakening, not a special state or experience, but a fundamental recognition of what you already are, what you've always been. It's like coming home to yourself, to the peace and freedom that are your birthright, to the awareness that's the very essence of your being. In one of the most profound Zen stories, a monk approached Master Huineng, the sixth patriarch, and said, "I have been practicing meditation for many years, but my mind is still not pacified. Please give me a method to pacify my mind." Huineng replied, "Bring me your mind, and I will pacify it for you." After a long silence, the monk said, "I have searched for my mind, but I cannot find it." "There," said Huineng, "I have pacified it for you." This exchange cuts straight to the heart of our exploration. When we look for the mind, for the separate thinker of our thoughts, we cannot find it. And in that recognition, peace naturally arises, not because the mind has been controlled or silenced, but because we've seen through the illusion of a separate self that needs to be pacified. So as you drift into sleep, let go of all effort and struggle. Let go of trying to control your thoughts or achieve a special state. Simply rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all states come and go. And from this effortless resting, a natural peace arises, the peace of coming home to what you've always been, to the awareness that's your true nature. In Zen, there's a beautiful metaphor about polishing a mirror. We spend years polishing, thinking we need to make the mirror more reflective, more clear. But one day we realized there was never any dust on the mirror. What we thought was dust was actually part of the reflection. The mirror itself, awareness, was always perfectly clear, perfectly reflective. In the same way, we spend years trying to perfect ourselves, thinking we need to become more peaceful, more enlightened, more spiritual. But one day we realize there was never anything wrong with what we are. The sense of lack or imperfection was itself just another thought, another appearance in the perfectly clear awareness that we already are. This recognition doesn't mean we stop growing or learning, but it transforms the entire tone and feeling of our path. We're no longer striving to become something we're not. We're expressing more fully, more clearly, what we already are. And this shift brings a profound relief, a deep relaxation of the struggle that's characterized so much of our journey. So rest in this recognition tonight. Rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all experience appears. And from this resting, allow sleep to come naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that's your true nature. There's a Zen saying, the mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. When it's calm, everything becomes clear. As you prepare for sleep, allow your mind to settle like water becoming still, not through effort or control, but through recognition of the awareness in which all turbulence appears. In the depths of sleep, in the quiet of dreams, in the stillness of dreamless rest, awareness remains. It's the constant presence in which all states come and go. And recognizing this awareness as what you are brings a profound peace. The peace of coming home to yourself, to the truth that's been here all along. This recognition doesn't require effort or achievement. It's not something you attain through struggle or discipline. It's what you already are, what you've always been. It's the awareness that's hearing these words right now, that feels the sensations in your body, that notices the sounds in your environment. And this awareness doesn't come and go with thoughts or emotions or activities. It's always here, always now, always what you are beneath all the layers of identification and belief. It's the constant presence in which all experience appears, waking, dreaming, sleeping, all states of consciousness. There's a profound Zen koan that points to this ever-present nature of awareness. Show me your face before you were born. This isn't asking about physical appearance or past lives. It's pointing to the awareness that transcends birth and death. That's always here, regardless of the changing states of the body and mind. So as you rest tonight, let go of all effort and struggle. Let go of trying to control your thoughts or achieve a special state. Simply rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all states come and go. And from this effortless resting, a natural peace arises, the peace of coming home to what you've always been, to the awareness that's your true nature. The Buddha described this peace as nirvana, not a distant heaven or special state, but the natural peace that arises when we no longer resist what is, when we recognize what we truly are, beneath all the layers of conditioning and belief. It's available right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require special circumstances or achievements. It only requires recognizing what you already are, the awareness that's been here all along, hidden in plain sight. So rest in this recognition tonight. Rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all experience appears. And from this resting, allow sleep to come naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that's your true nature. As you settle deeper into relaxation, notice how thoughts begin to slow down naturally. This isn't because you're controlling or suppressing them, but because you're no longer fueling them with attention and identification. When we recognize ourselves as the awareness in which thoughts appear rather than the thinker of thoughts, thinking naturally quiets like waves settling in a pond when the wind stops blowing. This natural quieting isn't something you need to make happen. It's what occurs spontaneously when you rest as awareness rather than engaging with the content of mind. And this resting allows for a deeper, more peaceful sleep. Not because you've achieved some special state, but because you've recognized what you already are, what's already here. In the Zen tradition, there's a saying, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." What this points to is that our resistance to what is, our constant wanting things to be different than they are, is what creates suffering and disturbance. When we rest as awareness, accepting what is without preference or resistance, a natural peace arises. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. It means we act from clarity rather than confusion, from love rather than fear, from wholeness rather than fragmentation. And this clarity, this love, this wholeness is what we already are, the awareness in which all experience appears. There's a beautiful Zen story that illustrates this acceptance. A farmer's horse ran away, and his neighbors said, "Such bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing several wild horses with it. The neighbors exclaimed, "How wonderful!" The farmer responded, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses, fell off and broke his leg. The neighbors said, "Such misfortune." The farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, military officials came to draft young men into the army, but they passed over the son because of his broken leg. The neighbors said, "How fortunate." The farmer replied, "Maybe." This story reveals a mind that rests in awareness rather than being caught in the constant judgments and reactions of thought. The farmer isn't denying the reality of events. He's simply not adding the extra layer of mental evaluation, the good or bad, that creates emotional turbulence. He's responding from a place of equanimity, from the recognition that he doesn't know the full unfolding of causes and effects, and that what seems bad may lead to good, and vice versa. This equanimity, this peace amidst the constantly changing circumstances of life, is available to all of us when we recognize ourselves as awareness, rather than being identified with the content of thought. It's not something we achieve or attain. It's what we already are, what's already here when we stop resisting what is. As you continue to relax and prepare for sleep, allow this recognition to deepen. Notice that even as the body becomes heavy and still, even as thoughts slow down and become more dreamlike, awareness remains. It's the constant presence in which all states of consciousness arise and pass. It doesn't require effort to maintain. It's what you are, your very essence. There's a famous Zen question. What is your original face before your parents were born? This enigmatic query isn't asking about physical appearance or ancestry. It's pointing to what you are prior to birth and death, prior to all conditions and circumstances, the awareness that has no beginning or end, that's present now as the knowing of these words. As sleep approaches, you might notice that the boundary between wakefulness and sleep becomes blurry. Thoughts may become more dreamlike, less coherent. The sense of the body might begin to dissolve. But throughout this transition, awareness remains. It's the context in which all these changes appear, the knowing presence that doesn't itself change. This is a beautiful opportunity to recognize that awareness isn't dependent on the waking state. It doesn't disappear in sleep or in dreams. It's the constant presence in which all states arise and pass. And recognizing this continuity of awareness brings a profound peace and trust. The recognition that what you essentially are doesn't come and go with states of consciousness. In the Zen tradition, there's a practice called sleeping meditation or dream yoga. It's not about staying awake during sleep or controlling your dreams. It's about recognizing the awareness that continues through all states, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It's about falling asleep with the recognition that you are not the body or the mind, but the awareness in which all bodily sensations and mental activities appear. As you drift towards sleep, you might notice moments when thinking pauses, when there's a gap between thoughts. In these gaps, awareness shines clearly, undistracted by mental content. These moments are like windows into your true nature, the awareness that's always here, always present, regardless of what thoughts are arising. You can rest in these gaps, not trying to prolong them or create more of them, but simply recognizing the awareness that's revealed when thinking temporarily subsides. And from this recognition, sleep can arrive naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that you are. In deep sleep, thought subsides completely, and what remains is pure awareness, unseparated from its content, experiencing itself as undifferentiated peace and fullness. It's a taste of your true nature, of non-dual being, experienced every night but typically overlooked because there's no conscious recognition of it. But tonight, as you drift into sleep, you can do so with a different quality of attention, not trying to stay awake or maintain consciousness, but simply recognizing the awareness that remains present through all states. And with this recognition, sleep can become not just a period of rest for the body and mind, but a return to your source, to the boundless awareness that you are. There's a beautiful Zen saying, "When tired, sleep. When hungry, eat." This simple instruction points to the natural wisdom of the body-mind when it's not interfered with by the constant commentary and control of thought. When we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than being identified with thought, we can trust this natural wisdom. We can allow sleep to come when it's needed, without resistance or effort. And as you drift into sleep tonight, allow this trust, this surrender to be complete. Let go of all effort and struggle. Let go of trying to control your thoughts or achieve a special state. Simply rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all states come and go. And from this effortless resting, sleep will come naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that's your true nature. So as the body relaxes and the mind quiets, remain as the awareness that you are, peaceful, present, undisturbed by the changing states of consciousness. And from this peaceful presence, allow sleep to embrace you, knowing that what you truly are remains present even in the depths of sleep. There's a Zen story about a student who asked his master, "What is the essence of sleep?" The master replied, "In deep sleep, you touch the ground of being. You return to your source." The student asked, "And where is this source?" The master said, "It is not a place. It is what you are." This story points to the profound opportunity that sleep offers. The opportunity to recognize our true nature beyond the limitations of the waking state, beyond the identification with thought and self-concept. In deep sleep, the sense of a separate self dissolves, and what remains is pure being, pure awareness, experiencing itself without division or separation. And as you drift into this state of pure being tonight, know that you're not losing consciousness or awareness. You're simply experiencing it in its most fundamental, undifferentiated form, as the ground of being, the source of all experience, the awareness that you are. So rest in this recognition tonight. Rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all experience appears. And from this resting, allow sleep to come naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that's your true nature. The great Zen master Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." This profound teaching points to the path of recognition, first turning attention toward the self, then recognizing that what we took to be a separate, solid self is actually empty of inherent existence, and finally realizing that we are not separate from all things, that the same awareness looks out through our eyes as through the eyes of all beings. As you prepare for sleep, allow this forgetting of the self, this recognition of your true nature as awareness rather than a separate entity. Allow the boundaries of the separate self to dissolve and rest as the boundless awareness that you are. In this boundless awareness, there's no inside or outside, no self or other, no here or there. There's just this, the seamless whole of experience, appearing and disappearing within the vast space of awareness. And this recognition brings a profound peace, a deep relaxation of the struggle to maintain a separate self, to protect and defend an identity that was never really separate in the first place. So as you drift into sleep tonight, allow this relaxation to be complete. Let go of all boundaries, all definitions, all limitations. Rest as the boundless awareness that you are, the awareness in which all experience appears and disappears. And from this boundless resting, sleep will come naturally, peacefully, as another expression of the awareness that's your true nature. In the depths of sleep, in the quiet of dreams, in the stillness of dreamless rest, awareness remains. It's the constant presence in which all states come and go. And recognizing this awareness as what you are brings a profound peace, the peace of coming home to yourself, to the truth that's been here all along. This peace is your natural state, your birthright, what you truly are beneath all the layers of conditioning and belief. It's not something you need to acquire or achieve. It's what's revealed when all the layers of misidentification fall away, when you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all experience appears, rather than any particular appearance within awareness. So rest in this recognition tonight. Rest as the awareness that you already are, the awareness in which all states come and go. And from this effortless resting, a natural peace arises. The peace of coming home to what you've always been, to the awareness that's your true nature. And as you drift deeper into sleep, allow this recognition to remain. Not as a thought or concept, but as the direct knowing of what you are, the awareness in which all states arise and pass, the ground of being that remains present even in the depths of sleep. As we settle deeper into our exploration of the mind, let's examine the fundamental Zen insight about thoughts and the observer. You know, there's a powerful Zen story that speaks directly to this question of who's thinking your thoughts. It's about a young monk named Huiko who approached the great master Bodhidharma after sitting outside his cave for days in the bitter snow, seeking teaching. When Bodhidharma finally acknowledged him, Huiko said, "My mind is not at peace. Please pacify it for me." Bodhidharma looked at him directly and replied, "Bring me your mind, and I will pacify it." After some time, Huiko returned and said, "I have searched for my mind, but I cannot find it." To which Bodhidharma responded, "There, I have pacified it for you." This story strikes right at the heart of what we've been exploring. When Huiko genuinely looked for his mind, for that supposed entity that thinks thoughts and experiences emotions, he couldn't actually find anything solid or separate. There was thinking happening, emotions arising, sensations flowing, but no separate mind doing it all. And in that recognition came a profound peace. This isn't just an ancient tale. It points to something you can verify right now in your own experience. When you look for the thinker of your thoughts, what do you actually find? Not a theory or a belief, but in direct experience. What do you find? There's awareness of thoughts. There's the content of thoughts. But can you actually locate the separate thinker that's supposedly producing them? Like Huiko, when we honestly look, we discover something startling. Thoughts are arising by themselves, spontaneously, without a separate entity manufacturing them. Just as your heartbeat happens without a beater, and your digestion happens without a digester, thinking happens without a separate thinker. It's a natural function of awareness itself. Another illuminating Zen story directly addresses this illusion of the separate thinker. A monk approached Master Joshu and asked, "What am I?" Joshu replied, "Have you finished your breakfast?" The monk said, "Yes, I have." And Joshu simply said, "Then wash your bowl." This response might seem mundane, even dismissive, but Joshu was pointing to something profound. Instead of giving the monk a philosophical concept about who he was, he directed him to the immediate, present moment experience, the simplicity of washing a bowl after breakfast. In that simple action, done with full awareness, the monk could discover his true nature, not as a separate thinker of thoughts, but as the awareness in which all experience, including thinking, appears. The beauty of Joshu's teaching is its directness. He's saying, don't look for yourself in concepts and theories. Look at what's happening right now. Your true nature is revealed in the most ordinary activities when they're experienced directly, without the overlay of conceptual thinking. This points to a central misunderstanding in our usual way of experiencing life. We think we are the voice in our head, the one who's supposedly doing the thinking. But that voice itself is just more thinking. It's another appearance in awareness, not the awareness itself. The commentary about experience isn't separate from experience. It's just another part of it. You might be thinking, but if I'm not thinking my thoughts, then who is? That very question contains the assumption that there must be a separate entity, a who, behind thinking. But what if thinking is simply happening, like clouds forming in the sky? The sky doesn't create clouds. They form based on atmospheric conditions. In the same way, thoughts arise based on countless causes and conditions, previous thoughts, sensations in the body, things you've heard or read, subconscious patterns, environmental stimuli, without a central director orchestrating it all. There's a powerful Zen story that beautifully illustrates this point. A student asked Master Shunryu Suzuki, "How much should I try to control my thinking during meditation?" Suzuki replied, "Leave your front door and your back door open. Let thoughts come and go. Just don't serve them tea." This simple story contains profound wisdom about our relationship with thoughts. Suzuki isn't saying we should try to stop thoughts or control them. That would be like trying to stop the ocean from forming waves. He's suggesting something much more radical. Allow thoughts to come and go naturally, but don't identify with them. Don't get involved with them. Don't serve them tea. When we observe our thoughts without identification, without serving them tea, something remarkable happens. They begin to lose their compulsive power over us. We no longer feel compelled to believe every thought that appears or to act on every impulse that arises. We gain a profound freedom, not the freedom from having thoughts, but the freedom to experience thoughts without being tyrannized by them. This is especially important when difficult thoughts arise, thoughts of inadequacy, thoughts of anxiety, thoughts of judgment toward ourselves or others. When we recognize these as just thoughts, appearances in awareness rather than statements about reality, they no longer define us or control us. We can let them be, let them move through us, without becoming them. In the Zen tradition, this recognition isn't achieved through effort or control. It's realized through direct seeing, through looking at our own experience with honest attention. When we look for the thinker of our thoughts, what do we actually find? Nothing but more thoughts, more sensations, more images, all appearing in the space of awareness. And what's left when we see through the illusion of the separate thinker? Just this, the simple, undeniable fact of being aware. Not as a concept or a belief, but as the immediate reality of our experience. This awareness is not personal. It doesn't belong to anyone. Yet it's more intimate than anything we call mine. Let me share another Zen story that directly addresses this understanding. A monk asked Master Ummon, "What is the self that's beyond all thinking?" Ummon replied, "The mountains, the rivers, the whole earth." The monk, confused, asked, "But how can those be the self?" Ummon said, "If you want to know the self beyond thinking, look at the mountains, the rivers, and the whole earth. That is your true face." Ummon wasn't speaking metaphorically or poetically. He was pointing to the direct experience that awareness, what we truly are, isn't confined to the boundaries of what we call me. It's not limited to the body or the personal mind. It's the boundless space in which all experience appears, including mountains, rivers, and the whole earth. When we identify exclusively with our thoughts, we experience ourselves as a separate self confined to a particular body and mind. But when we recognize ourselves as awareness, the sense of separation dissolves. We still experience thoughts, sensations, perceptions, but we experience them as appearances within awareness rather than defining who we are. This understanding transforms every aspect of our experience. Thoughts no longer appear as my thoughts, but simply as movements within the field of awareness. Emotions no longer define who we are, but are seen as temporary energetic expressions arising and passing. Even the body is experienced not as a separate object, but as a constellation of sensations appearing in awareness. And this recognition isn't a special state or experience. It's what's already here, what's always been here. It's the awareness that feels the sensations in your body, that hears the sounds in your environment. It's not something to achieve or attain. It's what you already are, beneath all the layers of thought and self-concept. There's a beautiful Zen story about a student who asked his teacher, "Master, how do I enter the way?" The teacher asked, "Do you hear the mountain stream?" "Yes," replied the student. "There," said the teacher, "that's the entrance." This story points to the immediacy of awakening, the directness of recognizing our true nature. It's not something distant or abstract. It's right here, in the most ordinary experiences, the sound of flowing water, the feeling of breath, the sight of clouds moving across the sky. When we experience these directly, without the filter of our concepts and judgments, we recognize the boundless awareness that we are. This recognition doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It's available in every moment, while washing dishes, walking down the street, having a conversation, dealing with challenges, celebrating joys. It's not confined to special times or sacred spaces. It's the very nature of our experience, the awareness in which all experience appears. And from this recognition, our entire relationship to life transforms. We no longer experience ourselves as a separate self, struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its infinite nature through this particular human form. We still experience the full range of human thoughts, emotions, and challenges, but we experience them differently, as appearances within awareness rather than defining who we are. And this difference makes all the difference. It's the difference between suffering and peace, between struggle and ease, between isolation and connection. To better understand this shift in perspective, let's look at another powerful Zen story. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. They came to a river with a strong current, where a young woman was waiting, unable to cross by herself. Without hesitation, the senior monk picked her up, carried her across the river, and set her down on the other bank. The monks continued on their way. After several hours, the junior monk, unable to contain himself any longer, said, "As monks, we're not supposed to touch women. Why did you carry that woman across the river?" The senior monk replied, "I put her down on the bank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story speaks directly to how thoughts create suffering when we identify with them. The younger monk was tormented by thoughts about rules, propriety, and his companion's actions. But these thoughts existed only in his mind. The actual event had ended hours ago. The older monk responded directly to the needs of the situation and then let it go completely. This is the freedom that comes from recognizing we are not our thoughts. The freedom to respond appropriately to each situation without being bound by rigid mental constructs. The senior monk wasn't ignoring the monastic precepts. He was expressing their true spirit, compassion and service, rather than being caught in their letter. And this freedom is available to us in every moment. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It only requires recognizing what we already are, the awareness in which all experience appears, and allowing that recognition to inform our engagement with life. When we're caught in identification with thoughts, we're constantly filtering our experience through concepts, judgments, and beliefs. We're not seeing reality as it is, but as we think it is or should be. We're arguing with reality, resisting what is, creating suffering for ourselves and others. This understanding is depicted in one of the most famous Zen stories about Master Nanin, who received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nanin served tea, pouring his visitor's cup full and then continuing to pour as it overflowed. The professor watched in alarm until he could no longer contain himself. "The cup is full! No more will go in," he exclaimed. "Like this cup," Nanin replied, "you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" This story directly addresses how our preconceptions and beliefs, our thoughts about reality, can prevent us from seeing what's right in front of us. When our minds are filled with fixed ideas, theories, and opinions, there's no space for direct seeing, for the immediate recognition of our true nature. Emptying the cup doesn't mean getting rid of all thoughts or becoming blank-minded. It means recognizing thoughts as just thoughts, not truths, not reality, not who we are. It means creating space around our beliefs and opinions, holding them lightly rather than gripping them tightly as if our identity depended on them. And from this spaciousness, this emptiness, a new kind of seeing becomes possible. Not the conceptual understanding of the thinking mind, but the direct recognition of awareness itself, of what we are prior to all thoughts and beliefs. In the Buddhist tradition, this is often referred to as beginner's mind, a mind that's fresh, open, receptive, not limited by preconceptions and habitual patterns. As the Zen master Shunryu Suzuki famously said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind there are few." This beginner's mind is available in every moment. It doesn't require years of practice or study. It only requires a willingness to let go of what we think we know and to look directly at what's here, at the awareness that we are beneath all the layers of thought and self-concept. Another profound Zen story illustrates this point perfectly. A monk asked his teacher, "Master, I've been meditating for years but still feel caught in my thoughts. How do I free myself?" The teacher picked up a cup and asked, "Do you see this cup?" "Yes," replied the monk. "Is your mind separate from the cup?" asked the teacher. As the monk pondered this question, the teacher suddenly dropped the cup, shattering it on the floor. The monk gasped. "Where is your mind now?" asked the teacher. In that moment, the monk experienced a profound awakening. When the cup shattered, his thinking mind stopped momentarily. In that gap between thoughts, he recognized his true nature, the awareness that's always present, always here, regardless of what thoughts are arising. This story points to a simple but profound truth. Our true nature is revealed in the gaps between thoughts. In those moments of mental silence, when we're startled, when we're absorbed in beauty, when we're fully engaged in an activity, the thinking mind momentarily stops, and our essential nature as awareness shines through unobstructed. These gaps happen naturally throughout our day, but we typically overlook them because we're so identified with the content of our experience. But with a slight shift of attention, we can notice these moments of pure awareness. The awareness that's always here, always present, regardless of what thoughts are arising. Consider another Zen story that directly addresses the illusion of the separate thinker. A student asked Master Banzan, "What is the most valuable thing in the world?" The master replied, "The head of a dead cat." "Why is the head of a dead cat the most valuable thing in the world?" asked the perplexed student. "Because no one can put a price on it," answered Banzan. This cryptic response points to something beyond all concepts and categories. Our true nature, the awareness that we are, cannot be measured, quantified, or assigned a value. It's prior to all judgments of good and bad, valuable and worthless. It's the ground of being from which all forms arise and to which they return. This awareness isn't something mystical or transcendent. It's completely ordinary, completely present, hidden in plain sight. This recognition doesn't require effort or achievement. It's not something we attain through struggle or discipline. It's what we already are, what we've always been. It's the awareness that feels the sensations in your body, that hears the sounds in your environment. And this awareness doesn't come and go with thoughts or emotions or activities. It's always here, always now, always what you are beneath all the layers of identification and belief. It's the constant presence in which all experience appears. Waking, dreaming, sleeping, all states of consciousness. There's a powerful Zen story that speaks directly to this ever-present awareness. A monk asked Master Zhaozhou, "What is the way?" Zhaozhou replied, "Your everyday mind is the way." The monk, confused, asked, "Then how do I approach it?" "The more you try to approach it, the further away you get," answered Zhaozhou. "But if I don't try, how will I know it's the way?" persisted the monk. Zhaozhou replied, "The way doesn't belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion, not knowing is blankness. If you truly reach the genuine way, it's like vast space, completely clear. How can you use right and wrong to argue about it?" This story points to the immediate presence of our true nature, not as something to be achieved or attained, but as what we already are, beneath all our efforts to become something else. The everyday mind Zhaozhou mentions isn't the thinking mind, the voice in our head. It's the awareness in which all thoughts, all experiences appear. And this awareness isn't something we find through effort or striving. In fact, as Zhaozhou points out, the more we try to approach it as an object of knowledge, the further away we get from recognizing it as the subject of all experience, as what we already are. This recognition isn't about achieving a special state or experience. It's about seeing what's already the case, what's been here all along, hidden in plain sight. It's like the fish finally noticing the water it's been swimming in its entire life. The water was always there, always present, but unrecognized because it was so pervasive, so fundamental to the fish's experience. In the same way, awareness is so fundamental to our experience that we typically overlook it, focusing instead on the content that appears within awareness: thoughts, emotions, sensations, perceptions. But with a simple shift of attention, we can recognize awareness itself, the context in which all content appears. One more Zen story beautifully illustrates this understanding. A monk approached Master Dogen and asked, "What is Buddha?" Dogen replied, "The mind is Buddha." The monk asked, "What if we have no mind?" Dogen answered, "Then there is no Buddha." This dialogue speaks directly to the paradox at the heart of our exploration. When Dogen says, "The mind is Buddha," he's not referring to the thinking mind, the voice in our head. He's pointing to the awareness in which all thoughts, all experiences appear. What Buddhism calls Buddha nature, our true self. And when the monk asks about having no mind, Dogen's response, "Then there is no Buddha," points to the inseparability of awareness and its contents. Our true nature isn't something separate from experience. It's the very fabric of experience itself, the awareness in which all forms arise and pass. This understanding cuts through the common misconception that spirituality is about transcending the world, escaping from thoughts and emotions, or achieving some special state separate from ordinary experience. On the contrary, it's about recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the everyday, the boundless awareness that's present in every experience. And this recognition transforms how we relate to every aspect of our experience. Thoughts no longer appear as my thoughts, but simply as movements within the field of awareness. Emotions no longer define who we are, but are seen as temporary energetic expressions arising and passing. Even the body is experienced not as a separate object, but as a constellation of sensations appearing in awareness. This doesn't mean we become detached or disconnected from life. Quite the opposite. When we're no longer caught in the trance of separation, we can engage with life more fully, more intimately, more compassionately. We're no longer defending a separate self against a threatening world. We're participating in the dance of life as awareness expressing itself in infinite forms. Let's examine another illuminating Zen story. A monk asked Master Yunmen, "What are the teachings of a lifetime?" Yunmen replied, "An appropriate response." This cryptic answer points to something profound about the nature of wisdom. It's not about accumulating knowledge or beliefs, not about understanding concepts or theories. It's about responding appropriately to what each situation calls for, free from the distortions of our conditioned patterns and personal agendas. And this appropriate response isn't based on following external rules or imitating others. It comes from recognizing what we truly are and allowing that recognition to inform our engagement with life. It's not about trying to be a good person according to some external standard. It's about expressing our true nature, which naturally manifests as kindness, compassion, and appropriate response. This understanding transforms how we relate to our path of growth and development. When we're identified with the separate self, spiritual practice can become another form of self-improvement, another attempt to fix or complete ourselves. We practice in order to become more peaceful, more enlightened, more spiritual, reinforcing the very sense of lack and separation that causes suffering in the first place. But from the perspective of non-duality, of recognizing ourselves as awareness, practice takes on a different meaning. It's not about becoming something we're not. It's about recognizing what we already are and allowing the obstructions to that recognition to naturally dissolve. It's like the sun that's always shining above the clouds. The sun doesn't need to become more sunny or more present. It's already fully here, fully radiant. Practice is about allowing the clouds to disperse so that the sun's natural radiance can shine through unobstructed. Consider one final Zen story that directly addresses this understanding. A monk asked Master Dogen, "I've been studying Zen for many years but still feel caught in duality. How do I transcend the separation between self and other?" Dogen replied, "Study the self." "I've been studying the self for years," protested the monk. "Then study forgetting the self," said Dogen. The monk asked, "What does it mean to forget the self?" Dogen answered, "To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. When you are enlightened by all things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly." This dialogue goes to the heart of our exploration. Studying the self means investigating our experience directly, looking for this separate self we believe ourselves to be. And when we look honestly, we discover, like Hui Ko at the beginning of our journey, that this separate self cannot be found. There's thinking happening, emotions arising, sensations flowing, but no separate entity doing it all. Forgetting the self doesn't mean becoming blank or mindless. It means recognizing that there's no separate self to begin with, that what we truly are is the boundless awareness in which all experience appears. And in this recognition, the sense of separation between self and other naturally dissolves. We see that the same awareness that's looking out through our eyes is also the awareness in which the entire world appears. There's no inside or outside to awareness. It's all one seamless whole. And this recognition isn't a one-time event after which everything is magically transformed. It's more like a continuous process of remembering and forgetting, recognizing and overlooking. We may have glimpses of our true nature, moments of clarity when we recognize ourselves as awareness rather than being lost in thought. And then we forget again, becoming reabsorbed in the content of experience. But each recognition makes the next one more likely, more accessible. We begin to develop a kind of muscle memory for recognizing awareness. And over time, these recognitions may deepen and extend, becoming more stable and pervasive. Let's consider how this understanding would transform our everyday experience. Imagine you're caught in a traffic jam, running late for an important meeting. Typically, this might trigger a cascade of stressful thoughts. This is terrible. Why does this always happen to me? My boss is going to be angry. I'm going to look so unprofessional. When you're identified with these thoughts, you become them. Your body tenses, your breathing gets shallow. You might grip the steering wheel until your knuckles turn white. You're not just having thoughts about the situation, you've become the situation. You're suffering, and there seems to be no way out except for the traffic to miraculously clear. But what if, in that moment, you recognize these thoughts as just thoughts? Not facts, not reality, not who you are, just temporary appearances in awareness. You'd still be in traffic, you'd still be late, but suddenly there would be space around the experience. You might notice the blue sky above, or the feeling of your breath, or the song playing on the radio. You might even find humor in the situation. This is the practical freedom that Zen points to. Not freedom from circumstances, but freedom within circumstances. Not the absence of thoughts, but a different relationship to thought. The traffic doesn't need to clear for your mind to clear. Your meeting doesn't need to be rescheduled for you to find peace, because the peace was never dependent on external conditions. It's the very nature of the awareness you already are. This shift in perspective doesn't require years of meditation practice, though practice can certainly help. It's available in any moment when we're willing to question our automatic identification with thought. And it applies to every aspect of life, from traffic jams to relationship conflicts, from work stress to existential questions. Consider another common scenario, a disagreement with a loved one. When we're identified with our thoughts about the situation, we become our position. We defend it fiercely. We see the other person as wrong, stubborn, unreasonable. We're caught in the drama of right and wrong, win and lose. But what if, in the midst of that conflict, we recognized our thoughts as just thoughts? Not facts, not reality, not who we are, just temporary appearances in awareness. We'd still have our perspective. We'd still communicate our needs and boundaries, but we wouldn't be completely identified with our position. We'd have space to listen, to understand, to respond, rather than react. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. It means we engage from a place of clarity rather than confusion, from connection rather than separation. And from this place, creative solutions often emerge that weren't visible from the narrow perspective of thought identification. Or consider how this understanding would transform our relationship to difficult emotions. When we're identified with our thoughts about an emotion, this is terrible, I shouldn't feel this way, there must be something wrong with me. We add a layer of suffering to the already challenging experience. But what if we recognize these thoughts as just thoughts? What if we allowed the emotion to be as it is, without resistance, without the added layer of judgment and self-criticism? We'd still feel the emotion, but we wouldn't be defined by it or controlled by it. We'd have space to respond wisely rather than react compulsively. This understanding also transforms how we relate to physical pain and discomfort. When we're identified with our thoughts about pain, this is unbearable. Why is this happening to me? When will it end? We add a layer of mental suffering to the physical sensation. But what if we recognize these thoughts as just thoughts? What if we experience the sensation directly, without the added layer of resistance and narrative? The pain might still be intense, but it wouldn't be compounded by mental anguish. And in that spaciousness, We might find resources for dealing with the pain that weren't visible from the contracted state of thought identification. Even our sense of self becomes more fluid and less fixed. Rather than maintaining a rigid identity based on particular thoughts, memories, and beliefs, we discover an identity that's open, responsive, and not limited to any particular content of mind. We are the awareness in which all identities appear, not any specific identity itself. This doesn't mean we lose our individuality or our ability to function in the world. On the contrary, we function more effectively because we're no longer confined by a narrow self-concept. We can respond to each situation freshly without the burden of maintaining a consistent self-image. And in relationships, this understanding can be transformative. When we no longer identify completely with our thoughts and opinions, we can listen more openly to others. We don't need to defend our position or prove ourselves right. We can engage in genuine dialogue, learning and growing together. So as we journey deeper into sleep tonight, let's return to our central question. If you're not your thoughts, who's thinking them? The direct, non-conceptual answer is that there is no separate thinker. There's just thought arising in awareness, like waves in the ocean, like clouds in the sky. The belief in a separate thinker is itself just another thought, another appearance in awareness. When we recognize this, a natural freedom arises. The freedom to experience thoughts without being tyrannized by them. We can let thinking happen without believing and reacting to every thought that appears. We can rest as the awareness in which thoughts arise and pass, neither suppressing them nor being controlled by them. And from this recognition, our entire relationship to life transforms. We no longer experience ourselves as a separate self struggling to survive in a threatening world, but as awareness itself, expressing and experiencing its infinite nature through this particular human form. We still experience the full range of human thoughts, emotions, and challenges, but we experience them differently, as appearances within awareness rather than defining who we are. And this difference makes all the difference. It's the difference between suffering and peace, between struggle and ease, between isolation and connection. And this shift is available right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require special conditions or experiences. It only requires a willingness to look directly at the nature of awareness itself, to recognize what you already are beneath all the layers of thought and self-concept. So let's take a moment to simply rest as awareness, to notice what's already here but typically overlooked in our absorption with the content of experience. Notice the awareness that feels the sensations in your body, that hears the sounds in your environment. Notice that this awareness isn't located anywhere specific. It has no boundaries, no edges, no center or periphery. It's just this open, boundless presence in which all experience appears. And notice that this awareness doesn't require effort or struggle. It's effortlessly present, effortlessly aware. You don't have to try to be aware. You are awareness. It's what you already are, beneath all the layers of identification and belief. This recognition is the heart of Zen Buddhism, not as a philosophy to believe in or a teaching to understand, but as a direct seeing of what's already the case. It's as simple and as profound as recognizing the awareness that you are. the awareness in which all experience appears. From this recognition, a natural ease and joy begin to infuse our life. Not the conditional happiness that depends on getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want, but the unconditional joy of being itself, of awareness expressing and experiencing its own infinite nature through this particular human form. And this joy is available right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require special circumstances or achievements. It only requires recognizing what you already are, the awareness that's been here all along, hidden in plain sight. So as you drift into sleep tonight, allow this recognition to be your companion. Rest as awareness rather than struggling with thoughts. Allow thinking to happen without getting caught in its stories and dramas. And notice the peace that arises naturally when you recognize what you are. Not a separate self defined by your thoughts, but the boundless awareness in which all experience appears. In this recognition, there's a profound rest, deeper than sleep, more refreshing than any relaxation technique. It's the rest of coming home to what you already are, to the awareness that's been here all along, to the peace that's your true nature. And from this rest, both sleep and waking life are transformed. Sleep becomes more peaceful, more rejuvenating, and waking life becomes more vibrant, more authentic, more aligned with what you truly are. Not because you've achieved anything special, but because you've recognized what's already here, the awareness that you are, the awareness in which all experience appears. As you journey through the night, remember that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear. And this awareness remains present even in sleep, even in dreams. It's the constant, unchanging presence in which all states of consciousness come and go. So rest in this awareness, this beingness that's your true nature. Allow the body to sleep, allow the mind to quiet, but remain as the awareness that you are, peaceful, present, undisturbed by the changing states of consciousness. And when you wake in the morning, bring this same recognition with you into your day. Notice the awareness that's present in every experience, the awareness that doesn't come and go with thoughts or emotions or activities. It's always here, always now, always what you are beneath all the layers of identification and belief. This profound gift of Zen isn't a new concept, but a direct pointing to what you already are, the awareness that's been here all along, the peace that's your true nature. From this recognition, your entire life transforms, not because circumstances change, but because your relationship to them shifts. You no longer experience yourself as a separate self struggling in a threatening world, but as awareness itself. This is the heart of awakening, not a special state, but recognizing what you've always been. It's coming home to the peace that's your birthright. As you drift into sleep, let go of all effort. Stop trying to control thoughts or achieve special states. Simply rest as awareness itself. From this effortless resting, a natural peace arises. The peace of returning to what you've always been.